Today, we are going to talk about the CE marking, the label that identifies clinical products in the European Union. To discuss this, we are joined by Paloma López Lemos, who is a consultant and auditor of ISO management systems. On her LinkedIn profile, she describes herself as a believer in quality and passionate about biotechnology. She's also a fellow industrial engineering graduate, and we almost belonged to the same graduating class. Tell us, Paloma, about your work. And what is this about being passionate about biotechnology, or why?
Very well, thank you very much. Look, I finished the degree, or started the industrial engineering degree, with the aim of working in that sector. Somehow, and by pure coincidence, in my final year at university, I attended a quality course taught here by the Asturian Quality School. I really liked everything related to the quality approach, continuous improvement, and so on. So that is how I got into quality. And my first serious job, after internships and the kinds of things you do when you finish your degree, was at a medical device company. And that is where I discovered that this sector also draws you in. Applying technology to the world of biology is fascinating because even today, in the times we live in, there are still clinical techniques or clinical protocols from the 19th century. So when you are able to contribute your small part to the development of a product or a new technology, and you see how it improves patients' lives, it creates an inner satisfaction that few jobs can provide. So yes, I am absolutely 100% passionate about biotechnology.
Well, I think I'm going to add that to my CV as well. Being passionate about biotechnology sounds very good. Well, what I wanted to talk about today was precisely that, certification or CE marking. And taking the opportunity to explain a little what Visionary is, on our website we show the logo with the CE letters, and next to those letters we include two texts. One says Class 1 medical device and the other says Declaration of Conformity. So tell us a little about what Class 1 means.
Okay, well, medical devices, like many other products such as machinery or toys, are regulated products. Their safety and performance are regulated by the European Union. That means they are required to carry a symbol, the CE marking, which represents that those products comply with the requirements that apply to them. Within the world of medical devices, there is everything. From software, which is perhaps among the most modern products, to very classic products such as bandages, plasters, thermometers, and wheelchairs. It is a type of product with enormous variability. A plaster or a breast implant, for example. This means that, according to the regulations, medical devices are classified into different types depending on the risk they may pose to a potential user or patient. The lowest risk products are Class 1 products. Products with the highest risk level, such as a breast implant, a defibrillator, or a pacemaker, are already in risk Class 3, which is the highest.
Of course, that is why Visionary is a Class 1 low-risk product. Next to the logo, as I was saying, there was a text that says Declaration of Conformity. In our case, we have a link to a document signed by the administrator of our company that says, I declare under my sole responsibility that Visionary is software for medical use, whose intended use is the treatment of visual deficiencies, vergence problems, and amblyopia in accordance with the requirements of European Union Regulation 2017/745 of the European Parliament. So there are several things there. What does under my sole responsibility and intended use refer to?
As I mentioned before, medical devices have different risk classes. Depending on the risk class of your product, as a manufacturer, you are required to carry out certain tasks or others, and to submit your product to certain controls or others. Logically, the lower the risk class, the simpler the controls, and vice versa. The higher the risk, the more complex the controls. In a Class 1 product, it is the manufacturer itself who, under its sole responsibility, declares the conformity of the product. That means there is no third party, no notified bodies, endorsing that safety or performance in some way. This does not mean it is a worse procedure than the others. It is simply what the regulations require. A manufacturer of a Class 1 product issues a declaration of conformity. That is correct. It is legally binding. It is a legally valid commitment, so to speak, made under the manufacturer's sole responsibility regarding the product.
Okay, I understand. I understand what you're saying. Of course, depending on the intended use, the category can change, because what determines whether a product is Class 1 or Class 2, as I understand it from you, is not so much the product itself, but what it is used for, and that would involve how the product is advertised, how it is presented, and what properties are attributed to it. Is it linked to the risk classification? Can that classification be consulted somewhere?
Exactly. The first thing a medical device manufacturer has to do is obtain a medical device manufacturing license. In Spain, you cannot manufacture medical devices if you do not have a license. The license is granted by the health authority in Spain, which is the Spanish Agency for Medicines and Medical Devices, and all medical device manufacturers are registered as such. So, at any given time, any citizen can access the health authority's database and check whether a specific company has a license and what it has it for. That is very important. As you rightly say, in the end, the manufacturer is the one who declares what its product is for. In the healthcare world, we have a very funny meme showing a scalpel and a phrase that says, "A scalpel is still just a knife for cutting meat." And it becomes a medical device at the moment when the manufacturer declares that this knife for cutting meat is used to cut, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I know many products that could do many things, but what really matters is what the manufacturer says they are for. So that is extremely important. No, it is not the health authority that comes along and says, "Hey, look, your product is for this." You are the one who declares not only what it is for, but also what clinical benefits it has. As you said, all of this also connects with the advertising of medical devices. You cannot advertise your product however you like. To begin with, there are specific rules depending on what it is for, who is going to use it, and so on. A product intended for professionals is not advertised in the same way as a product intended, for example, for users. And of course, advertising cannot suggest that the product is useful for something that, from a regulatory point of view, it has not been declared to do. In other words, if you have told the health authority or your notified body that your product is for one thing, you cannot then publish advertising saying it is for many more things.
Okay, it is perfectly regulated and controlled, and it is also something the health authority monitors quite closely. As the Spanish Agency for Medicines and Medical Devices says, we could make the consultation. For example, it could be checked what visionary is authorized for or how it has been defined, right? We were saying that the logo is mandatory, right? So that means we have to make it visible somewhere. Where should the logo be visible?
The regulation applies to any type of product. What it says is that the logo must be placed on the product itself. If that is not possible, imagine a substance, for example. It can be placed on the packaging, in the documentation that accompanies the product, and so on. Of course, in software, it is possible to place the CE marking, and it is also possible to include the declaration of conformity there. So the usual thing is that, within the software itself, users can access both the CE symbol and the declaration of conformity. And that is where the interesting information for the user is found. The manufacturing date, for example, and all the information needed to use the product safely.
I understand, and as we have discussed a lot, that is what led us to place it on the website because it is still part of Visionary, especially the intranet, which is where we manage patients as well as the software itself. The logo and the link also appear in all the games. I still find it surprising because in other visual therapy products that I see being marketed in Spain, I cannot find either the symbol or the link, but perhaps I am missing something. In any case, Visionary is a Class 1 product, as we have been saying, but I have already seen, at more than one trade fair, some Class 2 products, which, from what you have said, means a stricter regulation. I do not know whether that means those products are better, but it certainly does mean that their use is regulated in a different way. Since you have already explained this more or less, please insist on this point. What would it mean to move from Class 1 to Class 2 or Class 2A, which would be the immediately higher category?
Look, the classification of a medical device is not decided by the manufacturer. The classification of a medical device is based on the classification rules included in the medical device regulation. It is true that the rules are sometimes a little ambiguous, but for software, for example, there is a single rule, Rule 11, which is specific to software and makes it very clear how to classify software in terms of risk. Let us say that the difference between moving from Class 1 to Class 2 or higher lies in whether the software provides information to the healthcare professional so that they can make some kind of decision. That decision may be the diagnosis of a disease, or it may be applying one therapy or another. The moment the software provides that information, it is impossible for it to be Class 1. It becomes at least Class 2. Depending on the type of information it provides, the risk class can then increase. In other words, it is not the same to provide information to apply a dermatology treatment as it is, for example, to provide information to diagnose cancer. That is when notified bodies come in. They are the ones that assess and audit whether the product really does what it says it does. To do that, everything related to the technical file and the clinical evidence that must be gathered comes into play, and so on. That is why it is a stricter assessment procedure than if it were Class 1.
I think everything you have said has been very clarifying. It is one thing to state that your product allows you to train something such as peripheral vision, and another to say that your product is a visual field analyzer, because, as you have explained, that ultimately entails greater risk. If that visual field analyzer does not work properly, the professional may be overlooking a pathology that could have significant consequences for the patient. I have to say again that I am still surprised because I have read advertising where a piece of software claims to allow precise diagnosis of the patient's visual abilities in 10 minutes. There it is already talking about diagnosis, not treatment.
Clearly, we are talking about a Class 2A product, at least. The moment we talk about prediction, diagnosis, or complete visual screening that allows ophthalmologists to make decisions, that is the key point. That is, if I am giving the medical professional information, data, or anything else that will somehow influence the making of a clinical decision with a patient, it is impossible for that to fit into Class 1. It is a Class 2A product or higher, I insist, depending on the type of information and what the doctor is going to do with it.
Well, I think we are going to remain in Class 1 because, after all, what we want to be is a visual therapy treatment tool. And in fact, what we want to be is the benchmark in visual therapy. And although we continue to accumulate scientific evidence, of which we are very proud, with all the articles we have also been discussing in these podcasts, we do not want to be a diagnostic product, at least not for now. So, well, that is clarified. Paloma, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure. We will see you soon in the next podcast. See you soon.